And a note to our audience, today is going to cover subjects of sexual violence that may be difficult for some to hear. This week, a survivor of Hamas's October 7th rape and murder rampage came forward on television. His face hidden and voice distorted, he described on camera how Hamas's elite death squads, the Nukba, caught him as he fled from the Nova Music Festival massacre. And what he shared was truly horrific. And I quote, "You try to resist, they take off your clothes, laugh at you, humiliate you, spit on you, touch your private parts, rape you." End quote. He was rescued by Israeli soldiers, one of the lucky ones to escape Hamas's inhumanity with his life. With so many of those raped also being murdered, as dead men, it seems, tell no tales. Murdered victims cannot testify. Convenient for those cynical Hamas cheerleaders who both justify and even indeed celebrate Hamas's attack on October 7th, while engaging in denial of Hamas's barbarity akin to a form of modern Holocaust denial. They say with a straight face that Hamas are religious men, that they would never violate their faith by murdering civilians in cold blood. They would never rape men, women, and children, and certainly not Jewish ones at that. In response to overwhelming evidence of Hamas's atrocities, senior Hamas official Bassem Naim cited Islamic principles that forbid any sexual relationship outside of marriage as his sole proof that such actions simply weren't possible. After all, Hamas is an acronym in Arabic for Islamic Resistance Movement. It is the Palestinian branch of the Sunni Islamist sect, the Muslim Brotherhood. But the rape and wholesale slaughter of Jews on October 7th isn't enough for the Hamas death cult. Hamas continues to prosecute inhumane atrocities against even their own people. Recently discovered Hamas documents reveal their protocols for finding and punishing homosexual people inside Gaza. Hamas interrogators are instructed on aggressive questioning focused solely on sexual preferences, and Gazans suspected of homosexuality are routinely executed. Yet, other Hamas documents, some found on the bodies of October 7th rapists and murderers, reveal the true face of Hamas. Phrasebooks with Arabic language transliterations of the Hebrew for take off your clothes, strip, or take off your pants. Plus, Hamas's Shura Council issued fatwas or Islamic legal rulings giving religious permission for murder, mutilation, and sexual crime, especially for October 7th. Captured Hamas terrorists said that they were ordered to murder women and children, crush their heads, and cut them off, and to rape corpses. And let's not forget, much of these atrocities were gleefully documented by these inhuman beasts with their own cameras, set up to catalogue every atrocity in excruciating detail. Nearly 10 months after Hamas declared war, after months of tentafadas and talking heads contextualizing October 7th, we must remember October 7th was the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Hamas murdered over 1,000 men, women, children, and even infants. Their rape, mutilation, and murder was systemic and premeditated, and they still hold 120 people hostage, including babies. All barbarity is permitted in Hamas's goal of destroying the Jewish state and committing genocide against its people, and this is the enemy we in Israel still face today. All this being said, let's now turn to take some questions from our audience watching live on social media, and please keep asking questions. We are ready to answer.
Our first question comes from Camille on YouTube Live. What is a Philadelphia corridor, and why does Israel want to control it?
Thank you, Camille, for the question. The Philadelphia corridor is a key strip of land bordering the bottom half, the southern part of the Gaza Strip from Egypt. It has been traditionally used as a base of control for those looking to get access in and out of Egypt to provide supplies, whether that be humanitarian, construction, or past affairs. Let's remember that the Gaza Strip is bordered only on 3 sides by Israel, but that key point in the south is bordered there with Egypt. Now, it's important for us to note and remember with that corridor that control of that will enable the IDF and Israel as a whole to prevent the import of non-humanitarian goods or goods that may be abused and misused by Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and others for non-humanitarian purposes into the Strip. And this is why it is so important for Israel to maintain control in the area. There is a reason and a capacity that despite Gaza, being surrounded on three sides in the past, they've still managed to accrue tens of thousands of rockets over the 17 years in which Hamas has controlled the Gaza Strip. This has prevented any sort of peace settlements or any sort of agreements from being able to take place, as so much of the supposedly civilian infrastructure is misappropriated and misused by Hamas, and continues to do so right up into the peak of what we saw on October 7th and the days and weeks following that, in which thousands of rockets were fired out of the Strip. Israel is eager to break down that supply line to maintain control of the Gaza Strip in order to ensure that they are able to continue to prevent the sort of weaponizing and military buildup that Hamas so eagerly wants, and at the same time continue to provide the essential humanitarian care that is needed for the civilians of Gaza.
Our next question comes from X. What should we expect from Bibi's speech in the United States, and what do you think the American response will be?
When it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu's, Israel's Prime Minister's speech in Congress at the moment, it is clear that what we see, unfortunately, in the United States is Israel becoming a partisan issue. And the most important thing that we here want to advocate for is the strength of Israel and the US's relationship beyond any particular partisan politics, beyond any particular leaders that may be taking control of any administration at any given time. The key point and message to get along here is that Israel and the US have a special relationship, that they have done so for decades, and that relationship must be maintained across all walks of political life. We don't want to see Israel become even more of a partisan issue inside the United States, nor do we want to see the relationship between the US and Israel become any sort of partisan issue here in Israel. This must be something that we all unify around as liberal democracies, fighting against the sort of tyrannical terror groups that we see here in and around Israel, from Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Iran, of course, itself, the authoritarian theocratic regime that is behind so much of the actions that are taking place in and around Israel at the present moment. It is critical at this time that we rally with allies around the world and continue to see that shared fight for liberal democratic values. And I think that's the clearest message that we hope to see come out of any interactions by any administration in the US and Israel.
Our next question comes from Stella on Instagram Live. What has been Russia's role in the war so far, and what do you think will happen going forward?
Stella, with Russia currently prosecuting its own war in Ukraine at the moment, it seems that this is yet another country that falls into its own interests within the region and, frankly, around the world. We've seen Russia willing to hop into bed with Iran on a number of issues, whether it be control in Syria and helping to support and prop up the Assad regime, whether we see it with them taking actions in Chechnya and other parts of the country or thereabouts, and of course, as we said, the ongoing war there in Ukraine. Russia, it seems, for the time being, certainly isn't interested in fighting for liberal democracy the world over. And for that matter, it is even more important to return to the point I just made about the Israel-US relationship, that the US continue to support Israel as the only liberal democracy here in the Middle East, to ensure that relationship is maintained, that the sovereignty, security, and capabilities of Israel as the only representative of that form of democracy here in the Middle East are maintained, regardless of what may be happening in the territory, in the region, or around it. This message is ever more critical. We saw the threats that Israel faced on October 7th. We've seen in the almost 10 months since then the continued threats faced by Israel. And critically, it is ever more important that Israel's role in the Middle East, in the region, and frankly, around the world be maintained in the face of so many threats to liberal democracy.
Our next question comes from Instagram Live. What is the current situation and update with the Houthis in Yemen?
Well, as we've continued to see threats going back and forth between the Houthis and Israel, in the wake of that horrendous drone strike that hit the center of Tel Aviv, causing a massive explosion in the heart of one of Israel's major cities, that unprovoked attack by the Houthis, who are trying to involve themselves in a war thousands of kilometers away from their own, while their people continue to starve, die of cholera, and not have the resources available to them to simply continue life. They choose to commit resources to trying to fight a war with not even a neighbor, another territory thousands of kilometers away. You can see where the Houthi priorities lie. You can see where the importance of this terrorist militia group lie in attempting to keep themselves promoted on the global stage and act like they're in control as they continue to block off facets of the Red Sea and limit trade there through the Suez Canal to try and big themselves, as it were, to make themselves seem important on a global stage. This simply is the goal of a regime that is incapable of simply ruling its own people, to simply maintaining control in its own region. And frankly, the fact that they continue to try and be involved with Israel in any way and continue to commit resources to a war, which, as I said, is so far away from their own borders and so irrelevant to their own excruciatingly critical interests in maintaining the health, security, and management of their own people, it frankly borders on the farcical, and it'd be something that you would hope that someone in Houthi leadership could try and get a clear sense around. But as we've said before, and we'll say again, serving as an Iranian proxy, as the Houthis indeed are, it seems that they are more interested in prosecuting Iran's interests than truly looking after the people of Yemen. And I just only hope that they truly find some sense in the near future and are able to focus on their own needs rather than being distracted by the interests of greater powers outside the country of Yemen itself.
Our next question comes from Instagram Live. Has there been sufficient support from the French to ensure the safety of Jewish Olympians and the Israeli team in the Olympics?
As we get closer and closer to the start of the Olympics later on this week, I think everyone here has a mind to the horrors of the past. Of course, thinking back to 1972 games in Munich and the terrible incident that led to the death of 11 Israeli athletes. Frankly, what we see here in France is, a hope and a need and an understanding by many of the need to secure Israeli athletes, to protect the Israeli team at a time and a place where people should be able to stand proud and loud of their own nation, to wave an Israeli flag with pride and to do so with a feeling of safety and security. I can't speak to the specificities of France's preparations in the lead up to the Olympics, but all I can say is that as a also key ally of Israel's, France can, and I'm sure is well aware of the need for increased security in and around Israel's athletes themselves, and of course any of their supporters who might be there trying to enjoy the Olympic Games, a time of joy and engagement and experience when athletes from around the world should be able to gather together with a feeling of safety and security to perform their best, for us as a world to see and cheer them on, as I certainly will be doing, supporting the Israeli athletes. I can only hope that we have a fruitful, a successful, and truly peaceful games, and that the greatest difficulty that I will have to face is whether to support Israeli or Australian athletes in any given event, should they cross paths. Let's just all hope that that is the biggest issue.
Our last question for today comes from Israeli Citizen Spokesperson Ashley Waxman-Bakshi. What do you say to Jews around the world who are removing their mezuzahs from their homes?
Ashley, thank you so much for calling in with that question. It's a sad state of affairs, is it not? Calls back to, I think, people marking their doors in anything from the Nazi context to way back in biblical times. The need to take or remove markings to hide themselves and hide their Jewish identity. And it represents a very sad state of affairs in a number of countries where Jews can no longer feel safe simply representing their identity. But this is where I'll take the chance to make a call out to all Jews out there around the world, especially in the diaspora, to stand strong and stand together and to help support one another. This is a chance for the Jewish community, no matter your level of religiosity, your level of engagement with the community in the past, whether you have an established Jewish community or no, but to come together and work with any communities that may exist at a grassroots level to provide the support and care for one another, to check in on elderly or infirm Jews in the community who may need the support of others from around the space and around the community, to join together and be there for one another, to keep an eye out. And of course, if you see something, certainly say something to protect and look after each other. This is a time to be alert, but hopefully in your community, not too alarmed. We can't speak to every case around the world, but on the whole, Jews have always been able to be there to support each other, and frankly, non-Jews as well. Any who would help to support civility, security, peace in those regions, we welcome your support. as well. There's no need to be Jewish in order to help support the Jewish people, to help support the Israeli community anywhere it may be around the world. We all have a right to feel safe and secure in our homes, no matter where that home may be. And this, I think, is the key takeaway message for today. All right, well, that is all we have time for today's daily briefing. I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Please tune in on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, Instagram, wherever you tune in at the same time tomorrow. That's 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. Eastern. It's so valuable to have you here viewing live. And of course, to please like, subscribe, give a heart, whatever it is on whichever platform you're on, to let us know that you're there. It's so important and helps us get the message out. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch. I've been Westropp-Evans. Thanks for watching.